Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson, Michael McDonald with Veterans in Politics. Today, our guest is going to be Noreen Demonte, who's the Las Vegas Justice of Peace for Department 10. But before we get to Judge Demonte, Mike, do you have any rants?
No, it's been really hot lately, and we're hitting the triple digits. So, yeah, I'm getting ready for that. A lot of pool weather. I got really burnt over the weekend. Went to Big Bear.
You're getting a little gray there. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't shave over the weekend, too, man. My whole face
was a little scruffy.
Got burnt. I got the 8,000 elevation, man. It got me. So, yeah. But we appreciate you coming on the show today and look forward to hearing what you do in justice court. Most people have no clue what goes on in what's the difference between justice court and district court, and what is your purview? Like, what do you do there? So maybe you can enlighten some folks out there.
So Las Vegas Justice Court, at least I'm in a criminal department. And so within Las Vegas Justice Court, we handle all criminal misdemeanors within the Las Vegas Township. So anything that's not City of Las Vegas, City of North Las Vegas, City of Henderson. We also handle felony cases occurring in Clark County up through the preliminary hearing. We do the bail the bail hearings. We do the temporary protective orders sometimes. I say sometimes because my department doesn't do temporary protective orders because I'm a domestic violence specialized department. So I handle half of the countywide filed domestic violence cases in Las Vegas Justice Court.
So Mike got a little bit ahead of himself.
He did.
Supposed to do the rant, his rant.
His rant was short. For how hot it is, that was a really short rant.
And then it comes back to me, and then you're supposed to do your bio.
Oh. All right. Sorry. Well, I'm going to rant about the heat.
Mike is filling in for Jim Jonas.
I will fill in for him on the rant. It's hot. I don't know if you just got heat stroke, and that's why you're not talking very much, but it is hot. It went like... bam! All of a sudden,
folks, bring your dogs inside. I had one of mine is running around here right now. So
yes, keep the dogs inside. I have 3 of them. They're not too happy because they're stuck in the house because they like to romp around in the yard. But yeah, the dogs have got to be inside. Do not put them in a car, please.
Because they'll be in front of you.
One of us. They'd be in front of one of us.
So, Judge Demonte, could you tell us your bio?
Okay, so I was born in Indiana. Okay. Graduated law school from Indiana University in Indianapolis, not Bloomington. Actually, prior to law school, in between college and law school, I lived in Chicago, worked for the Goodman Theater. I thought I wanted to be an actor, but it turns out I just wound up waiting tables. So
that's a big leap.
Big leap?
From acting to waiting tables.
Oh, no, that's basically what you do when you try to be an actor. You're waiting tables. Oh, yeah. So I worked at Leona's down in Chicago at the Lincoln Park location. Uh-huh. And if you ever find your way in Chicago, Leona's is the best pizzeria. Everybody, it's amazing.
Deep dish, right?
I heard
they do deep dish, and they do the thin crust, and they have amazing pastas.
I heard it's the water to make good pizzas.
For New York, yeah. Chicago pizza is a little different. Chicago is it's a deep dish, sometimes stuffed. So you'll have like the layer of crust and then the cheese and then the sauce and the toppings on top because you put the cheese next to the crust so that it can cook longer without drying out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Please continue.
Okay. And then I went to law school. After law school, I moved here to Las Vegas.
Where'd you go to law school?
Indiana University.
Indiana. You said that, right?
That's okay. That's all right. So yeah, and actually bartended and waitressed all the way through law school. You got to pay those bills still. Yeah. And moved here right after law school, took the bar here, passed, started working originally. Took it one time. I
know people that
Thank goodness.
5 times.
I probably would have left if I didn't pass. I probably would have gone back to Indiana because that was a hot summer. And what's funny is like everybody says, "Oh, it's a dry heat." No, it's an oven. Like 110 is 110. There's no getting around it. And following law school, I started practicing actually as a criminal defense attorney first. I was in Las Vegas Municipal Court, Department 3, George Assad, and was the public attorney in there. And then joined the district attorney's office in 2004. Worked there for 18 years. For the 12 out of those 18, I was running the repeat offender program, dealing with the people with the 10-time felons.
They couldn't get it right the first time.
They couldn't get it right the first 10 times. I also served on the gun crimes unit, the vehicular crimes unit, the outlying unit.
You're a Second Amendment person, right?
I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. There are 10 amendments, not 9, 10.
No, actually, I think there were like
There's 27 amendments to the
Yeah.
Constitution.
Well, I mean, sorry, to the Bill of Rights. Yeah, sorry, I misspoke. Yes, there are quite a few
10
more amendments. Yeah, there are 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights.
Yeah,
But the 14 is one of my favorite. How she just got 10?
I know, I skipped through a ton of them. There's like this glaring light in my face.
A fair judiciary. A fair judiciary. Mark, could you fix that light?
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. But anyway, so I'm a firm believer in the entire Constitution, all of it.
Okay. What's your favorite amendment?
The first.
The first.
Freedom of speech.
Very good. I got one candidate came on here and he goes, my favorite is the second because the second takes care of the rest.
The second does the thought behind the second is it does protect everything else.
And you know what?
That
That Second Amendment, I don't know what their thinking was, but they did it right. I think they're visionaries because the Second Amendment is what is protecting this country from oppressors from abroad, because nobody wants to invade a country that 329 million Americans all have weapons.
And I believe it was World War II that, and I can't remember where I read this, that Hitler had thought about trying to attack America, but didn't because
we all have guns.
Well, we don't all have guns, but I mean, the citizenry was armed.
Yeah.
And but our founders were visionaries in more ways than just that, because they lived through country that got it wrong. They lived through what it was like to be completely unheard, to have a government that wasn't of the people, by the people, for the people. But they also wrote in there an understanding that they knew what they were creating wasn't perfect. And so they built in an amendment process, which is how we have that many.
How come we haven't had an amendment in almost 100 years?
It takes,
there's proposed amendments.
It takes a lot. It takes 2/3 of both houses. And honestly, the amendments that some people have been throwing out they're fairly one-sided, which that's why it takes such a high majority, is that you don't want your Constitution to be amended to fit the interests of one party or the other. You need everybody.
Yeah.
I was
Some people
taught.
don't realize it.
No, my government and civics teacher in high school, his name was Bruce Hitchcock from Noblesville, Indiana, and he always taught us. He said, the eagle has 2 wings, left wing, right wing. You do need both. With only one wing, that eagle's not going to fly. You can't fly with one wing. You do need both. You do need the input of everyone. Because, I had also read something somewhere that, there's a lethal dose of everything, even water. Too much of anything can lead to chaos. You do need that temperance. You do need that in-between moderation. And you need to hear from everyone, which is why the first is my favorite. Because you don't know if you're going too far to one side until somebody tells you, whoa, time out.
I don't even, sorry, Mike, I don't even think I have a favorite amendment. I think I like all of them equally well because they all serve.
I think because none of us have been faced with having to quarter soldiers, we kind of...
Well, you said the 14th was your favorite, right?
You said
no, I said because she was saying 10.
Because I said 10. Because I misspoke.
And I'm like, the 14th, that's a fair judiciary.
Yeah, the 14th is
But the first is there for is first for a reason, right? I mean,
the first is first for a reason. The first is first because you need to be able to tell your government, hey, stop. I have a grievance here. We've got a problem here. I have a suggestion here. Without that, you're being ruled. You're not being governed, you're being ruled.
And the reason why I brought it up, Judge, because I think it's extremely important that for whoever is on the bench to know the Constitution and live by the Constitution to when they render decisions down the line. And I wanted to ask you, you said that your bench, you do a lot of domestic violence.
Yes, my department is domestic violence, misdemeanor and felonies through
Could
preliminary.
you tell the folks out there the statute of limitation and how on domestic violence?
Well, it kind of depends on what it is, because you can have misdemeanor domestic violence, which is a 1-year statute of limitations. You can also have...
They have to do what to have a misdemeanor?
The misdemeanor is usually a first or second offense.
Okay.
And that means that under Nevada law, if you commit a battery and the person you're committing that battery on falls into a certain relationship category, and usually for our court's purposes, it's an intimate relationship. They took brother-sister out of it
Really?
a couple legislative sessions ago, unless there's a...
cohabitation?
not a cohabitation so much as, let's say, your brother's caregiver.
Wow.
Then it still falls under domestic violence, but 2 brothers duking it out in mom's living room because they had too much on Easter is only going to get charged as
Or maybe
a
one
battery.
disrespected mom and the other one
exactly.
protected mom.
Exactly. Parent-child falls under, or child on parent falls under domestic violence statute. And so under Nevada law, it's those categories, and it comes to my court if it's an intimate relationship. And we've been seeing a lot of the child on elderly parent too.
That's a shame.
Lately, which is it is a shame.
Do you think it's too broad, like right now, or like our battery or assault statutes? Like domestic violence can be anything. We used to have the old cool off period. Say, hey, you go somewhere. If there's an altercation, now if the police get called out, they usually have to take somebody to jail, and usually the aggressor. And then domestic violence is a serious crime. You lose your gun rights for 7 years. I've seen and heard a lot of people.
7? I thought it was permanent.
It's permanent.
Oh, unless you get your rights restored. Yeah.
Well, you can only get them restored
by the governor's office or something like
for
that.
statewide purposes.
Yeah.
You're still federally prohibited.
Just by one. Let's say you yelled at somebody. I've heard.
So I think. If I remember right, it is still prohibited for marijuana use too under federal law. I think they're looking at trying to change that, but
well, they used to.
But alcohol is okay though. Sorry.
No. but domestic violence, you used to not be able to have a trial by jury either. You'd have to go and it's considered a non-serious crime. But when you lose your gun rights for 7 years, that's a
it's constitutional right.
And it's a form of violence that stays on your record for many years.
It stays for 7.
So
and it's sealable after a certain point in time, and I can't remember. I can't remember if that one's 7 or longer, but it's used against you as an enhanceable offense for 7.
Yeah.
And so if you get 2 priors, then the 3rd becomes a felony, and that is a non-probationable felony. And
a felony if you put your hands around somebody's neck.
Yes, so battery by strangulation is a category C felony, but if it's domestic violence related, it is a non-probationable category B felony.
Is there a 2-year statute of limitations on that from when the incident took place to when you could file?
If it's a felony, it's longer than 2 years.
Is it longer than 2?
Yeah, it depends on the category of felony. Okay. It's anywhere between 3 and never.
We did some lobbying to get domestic violence as a merited system, like hey, if there was no marks, no harm, no foul, then it should be dismissed. Which sometimes the DA
there's PTSD that follows that.
Yeah, it's not real emotional.
What the DA's office has been doing is they've been giving early offers on a good majority of the cases that are basically plead, stay the adjudication. So you're not adjudicated, your rights aren't affected. And if you take these classes, stay out of trouble for a period of time, maybe do different requirements, they've been agreeing to dismiss the case. And I want to say from what I've been able to see, and I've only been on the bench since January, about 90% of the people who take that negotiation see it through to the end and wind up with that dismissal at the end. The people that are the ones that wind up getting that adjudication, it's normally because they committed a new criminal offense.
I've heard stories, people have an argument and the police get called out and they have to take somebody to jail, and they're like, hey, I don't want the DA's office will call the other party, even though they don't want to press charges or anything. They will go and still pursue those charges, and then they end up with a domestic violence on their record, or they do some kind of plea deal.
Well, you got to also remember that not every domestic violence scenario is a one-off, a push, something like that.
Yeah.
And what you're dealing with under severe domestic violence scenarios, which there are a lot of those, and unfortunately there's a lot more than most people know about.
Or they're bruised up or bleeding.
Yeah, and a federal agent that I was talking to once, he used to just be an officer in another jurisdiction before coming here. And he would talk about, because we got to talking and he had mentioned, he goes, what frustrated me about domestic violence is, I'd show up on scene and it'd be a woman without a mark on her, angry as you know what, saying, look at this, he did this to me. And then I'd show up on another scene and it would be a woman with like broken bones and bruises in, various stages of healing, which means she's been going through this forever, telling me that nothing happened.
Yeah.
And so you have to give a little bit of, it's really hard. It's really hard when you've just got one police report to know which one you're dealing with. Until you know what the dynamics of the relationship are and you've dug into the criminal history to see how many arrests there've been that result in dismissals. And, and unfortunately, what we're seeing is the more serious ones are the ones that wind up getting dismissed because a victim didn't come in.
So they pursue
and it's a really hard thing for everybody to try to manage because you've got a district attorney's office that is insanely understaffed. You've got a public defender's office that's insanely understaffed. And you've got police that are insanely understaffed. And in order to be able to try to front end and find out which scenario you're dealing with, nobody has the resources to do that. And it's really sad.
So could you tell us a little bit about your campaign?
My campaign? Last year?
Last year.
Okay, so I didn't file until the very last day. It was around noon on the last day of filing. And I had kind of reached a point in my career where I was like, there's not a category of crime I haven't handled, that I haven't dealt with. That I think I've tried just about every kind of case. How do you deal with it though?
How do you, what ease your mind? How do you, because sometimes it's like, too much. It's like it's like a veteran in combat,
It was a lot. And what's funny is, we got to talking about earlier we were talking about the child on elderly parents. Mm-hmm. And the case that just bothered me the most was one I prosecuted with Elizabeth Mercer. And I had asked her to do it with me because I actually had it as a repeat offender case.
Any relationship to Michelle Mercer?
No.
Okay.
No. Elizabeth Mercer she's now on the homicide team, but she was the team chief of the gun crimes unit. But at the time I asked her to do it with me, she was on the domestic violence team and I was on repeat offenders. And the guy's name was Richard Kravitz. And Richard Kravitz had a very lengthy violent history. And it kind of started with him beating up the mother of his children. And to the point where the domestic violence detective took photographs of the inside of the house.
Nasty.
He had a chain on the door to lock her in the house. And so he was like...
Is that would that be considered kidnapping?
It would if she would cooperate. And he had actually gotten angry with her because the washing machine overflowed and he beat her so bad that he shattered her jaw. And he told his mother, Sarah Kravitz, that she was forbidden to take her to the hospital. Well, so the mom was like, well, he didn't say anything about quick care, so she took her to urgent care, which of course then is like, we can't deal with you. You're going to the hospital. So the police are called. And of course, the mother of the children is saying, he didn't do anything to me. And CPS takes the children because, you get into a scenario like that.
Is it Stockholm or is it fair?
I don't know what it was with her. She actually wound up testifying in his penalty hearing.
Did you hear about the one recently that happened? I hate to interrupt, but there was a gentleman named Stephen Roberts who's in family court and ended up kidnapping the girlfriend. It was a custody battle. Kidnapping the girlfriend and killed her and killed himself. It was on the news last week. I don't know if you heard of that one.
I probably missed that one, but it happens. I'm not surprised it happens.
Do you think mental illness might be a form of why?
It can be. It can be. But I have to tell you, some people may just be bad seeds.
Crazy.
Yes. And so, of course, like Child Protective Services has those kids, and he has the kids back for a weekend, and his mom's with him, and he handcuffs his mom to a chair.
Oh my God!
And beats her with a 2x4. And has
his
the
own
kids,
mother.
His own mother, and he has the kids beating her too. So he winds up going to prison for that. And while he's in prison, mom's other son, they put her in an assisted living facility under an assumed name. But mom is mom, and moms are always going to be moms. Mom reached out to him in prison. So he gets out, tells her that, oh, you're out of money. We can't afford this place anymore. Mom was worth millions. So he says, you need to, buy me this house. So he gets her to buy him this mansion.
And he beat her, handcuffed her.
This is after he beat her, handcuffed her with a chair.
For him?
I think she was afraid. The estate planning attorney basically called him out on it because he'd get phone calls from her asking to transfer all this money to Richard. And he was like, I'm not doing that anymore. So Richard sends him a threatening letter. And then eventually on her birthday, around Thanksgiving, mom goes into the hospital with a skull fracture about this long. She dies in the hospital after telling people in the hospital, I got into a fight with my son on my birthday. And
He killed his own mom.
He killed his own mother. But some of the evidence we had were these giant poster-sized pieces of paper where he wrote out instructions for the estate planning attorney. Transfer this amount to this account in favor of Richard. They had actually written a clause into the trust that if one person does violence on another person in the trust, they inherit nothing. He got her to write out that she wanted that clause removed. And there were these giant post-sized pieces of paper with his handwriting and then her handwriting, like he was making her practice it. And that was probably the one example of there are just some people in this world that are pure evil.
Where was the dad at?
I forgot to mention. His father fell off a roof and died.
Oh, really?
And there was always suspicion that he had done something.
What's the time before he ended up in prison for mom? How long before?
I want to say about 10 years.
But did you know about the ACE study, right? Like the adverse childhood experience study. So like the root cause of why people do certain things because some kind of trauma in childhood or something.
And it's highly possible because what came out and he didn't actually know this until he got his discovery. He was adopted.
Oh, see. So
he could have had something, with his previous parents. I mean, he kind of alleged that his father had beat him. Nobody that knew the family seemed to think there was anything to that because the other son seemed fine.
Wow.
But yeah, that case, that one was a hard one. That was a very hard case.
Yeah, I could imagine. And how did that work on your psyche?
That one, I think that was probably one of the few times I was actually afraid.
I've heard.
I was actually afraid of the person on the other side of the room. Most of the time, I wasn't. Yeah. That one, I was, and I wasn't the only one. He, when he was because he was out of custody because he had all this money, so he bailed out. And so when he was actually found guilty, I had asked to have him remanded. I said, "He's been found guilty of first-degree murder. He can't stay out. We're done." And we were in front of Judge Barker, and he's begging Judge Barker, "Judge Barker, I've done a lot of research on you. I know you're a fair guy. I know your wife's name is..."
Oh.
And the whole room just went quiet.
Oh, that sounds like a subtle threat.
It sure felt that way to everyone sitting there. It was...
That's like, take them now. I want a TPO right now.
It was...
Did you the judges take that in consideration, like that person? I mean, like that's a horrible thing that could happen to somebody, right? But to put yourself in that shoes of who, that client or that person that's being present. What was that person's background? Why would they ever do something that family takes them in? But they must have had deep rooted issues. You know what I mean? Do you guys ever think of that on the bench? Like I know they have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the time. All the time. You can't avoid taking that into consideration. And you're a very bad judge if you don't take that into consideration. But you have to balance that with the safety of the community at large. And you cannot put innocent people in harm's way. You just can't. And that's the hard part, and that's the struggle, and I did the repeat offender program for so long. I feel like that gave me a perspective that other people didn't have, because I was always dealing with people with these obnoxiously high records, and sometimes it was appropriate to send them to prison. Sometimes it wasn't.
Does the Good Samaritan law applies here in the state of Nevada?
We don't have a duty.
We don't have a Good Samaritan
like the
law.
Princess Diana, no.
And we really don't have that many diversionary court programs either.
We have more than we used to.
We have the highest incarceration of the mentally ill here in Nevada, I've heard too.
We don't really have any mental health facilities.
And
we don't.
If you're a nonviolent offender, what would you? I mean, I don't know if you sentence people to prison or not, but when on what basis do you say, okay, this person needs help or this person needs prison? And then versus like, okay, I guess there's no beds, we'll send them there, which prison probably isn't the best place for people.
No, and here's the thing is I don't get that at my level because prison's not an option for me. That's only for felonies. I stop at the preliminary hearing.
You stop at CCDC.
Yeah, exactly. The buck stops at CCDC. And, but when it comes to that, it is very well tempered. If there's something that I can work with them on, then I'm absolutely going to do it. If you're just missing classes because you don't have the money to pay for them or things like that, of course I'll work with you. I'll give you all the time in the world you need. But if you're out there still hurting people and putting other people in harm's way, then that's when you got to say, okay, this isn't a good fit. We're a little done here. But absolutely. And I even did that at the DA's office. What's funny is it's like, because, I was doing repeat offenders, which my very job description, the mission was to seek that habitual criminal treatment. But I didn't do it all the time.
But just to send people to prison and then they become worse off. And what you never
they escalate. They escalate. And so if I could find an alternative to incarceration, I would do it when it was appropriate.
Did you guys work with nonprofits on trying to get people help?
We didn't, because that involves consultation with defendants that ethically we weren't allowed to have. Right. But I would work with their attorneys all the time. Hey, I got them into this program. What can we do? I said, okay, here's what I can do. I'll suspend this amount of time over their head. How long is this program? We can do a probationary period. This is what I want, X, Y, Z. I remember one defense attorney talked me into giving probation to an 11-time convicted felon. I did it. And you know what? He hasn't been in trouble since.
Non-violent offender or something like that.
It was non-violent. They were fraud cases.
Okay.
He bailed out of custody, and I fought him on that. I was like, I want to see where these are legitimate funds. And he'd gotten out of custody. And of course, like back then, the Metro was a little better staffed than they are now. And you could actually like have the repeat offender, because he was a repeat offender, of course. That's why I had him. And I was like, you could have them follow him, make sure he's not committing any new crimes. And, they're like, he keeps going to Child Haven. And come to find out, he'd had a baby. And the mother was addicted and the child was in Child Haven. And so his attorney was like, listen, if I can prove to you he's clean, if I can get him into this program, what can we do? What can we do to save that kid? And so what we did was we suspended a large habitual sentence over his head, because the fraud offenses identity theft carries such big penalties, that we were able to suspend 10 to 25 years over his head. And I wrote that guilty plea agreement like, hey, you mess up, this is it, this is your shot. There's nothing, no coming back from this. You mess up, you are doing every ounce of that 10 to 25 years.
So you believe in giving people chances or giving?
Oh, I absolutely do. And I'm happy to report he's got his attorney told me they've got 4 kids now. And
So he's doing good.
He's doing good.
So you've been on the bench 7 months, going on 7 months.
Going on 7 months.
Congratulations.
Why, thank you.
What are you on any specialty courts?
No. So because I've got the domestic violence courts have a much heavier caseload than some of the others. And kind of the more senior judges kind of are able to take those. I'd love to do one.
Is there a mental illness court?
A mental health court at the justice court level? I think they're trying to get one done. I think Judge Wood is working on that.
Okay.
But yeah, there is one up in district court. And so I know at least we've been trying to get some people into the district court one, even though their case is down in justice court, just to have those facilities and those things for them. But there's community court. Right? Yeah, it's the resources is what you need. But, we've got community court for the homelessness. We've got veterans court, obviously, that's near and dear to your heart. And it's a wonderful program that Judge Letitia is running. We've got the drug court. We've got the DUI courts. We've got the moderate offender court for the DUIs that are still at the misdemeanor level. But it almost seems like we're trying to over-specialize sometimes, when I just wish we would have more access to facilities. The puppy.
No, that's one thing that we're lacking in our community, I believe, when we're working with some nonprofits.
Yes.
And then partnering, those nonprofits partnering with the court system. So, I mean, maybe you can give some guidance on that. There's certain programs or JU, the judicial assistants, or some that are creating those.
Yeah, so I know Judge Wood is starting to really try to get something going with mental health. But remember, all these things take money.
Yes.
And you got to go to the county commission to ask for the money. And you can't ask for the money without the plan in place, but you can't have the plan in place until it's hard sometimes. It's very hard.
What do you hope to accomplish being on the bench?
I just want to do the right thing.
And what drove you to run for this public office?
This one in particular, or
This one.
running?
This one.
So the person that had the seat prior to me, she'd been appointed. She didn't have hardly any experience, and not really her fault. I think there was a thought that it was supposed to be a civil department, and then it didn't.
Sybil Dotson.
Sybil Dotson, yes. And so I think she got appointed because people had in mind that it was supposed to be a civil department. But then it wound up being criminal. And she was in over her head.
Yeah, she didn't return phone calls either. So,
do you think judges should be appointed or should be elected? I mean, what do you?
You know what's funny is I watched your
which one?
I watched your episode on that when you had Paul Patta and Tim Williams here.
Oh, Judge Williams, that's my bud, and Paul Patta.
I do. I love them both. I kept trying to get Judge Williams to take some criminal. He refused.
Judge Williams is this is his last term. And,
yeah, I know.
And he's done it.
But I have to say, I go back and forth on that, because sometimes you get really great appointments for people that are amazing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get appointments that really miss the mark, which unfortunately that's why I mean, they
should have experience in life, not just come from law school to going to be a judge and you have no real life experience.
Well, it's not just life experience, but it's also not all lawyers are on the same plane. I mean, you'll bring up family court to me. I don't know anything about it. I've done criminal law ever since I stepped out of law school. I'm told I'm not missing anything.
Well, you can probably understand why there's so many criminals due to the family court.
Yeah, I mean, and I know, and just from what I'm seeing in domestic violence court, relationships are messy.
It is.
Yeah.
And, someone that you've sworn an oath to God to spend the rest of your life with, suddenly deciding they hate you can really...
There's a thin line between love and hate.
There is. And so I see how it happens, and I see how it really it maddens people. And I always kind of would joke about, not when I was a lawyer, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Like,
Well, just, can you, there's a judicial college for judges, right?
Yes.
That at least they get some knowledge about what's going on. We were trying to lobby for judges, attorneys, people that sentence people to prison to actually experience that too. There is a thing where they do a tour.
Them going to prison?
No, well, hear me out there. So in order to sentence to somebody, like in the military, like if you can't expect somebody to tell somebody to do something if you haven't already been there, experienced it. So if the judges, attorneys, they do a tour of like, hey, these are the bad people, these are the cages that they go in. But if you actually experience the food and you sit and lay in those beds and you say, this is what the worst of society is given, and where the programming, if you actually experience and see what it goes on, like I don't know, a week or a couple of days, even a couple of days. I mean, I know some judges that have went to jail or actually did something. And it's an enlightening experience. Instead of just doing a tour saying, oh, this is what happens. But to actually experience that. I don't know if you've ever seen that show 90 Days In or whatever. Like
yeah, I've seen that show.
So it's a completely...
Is that like Undercover Boss?
It's something like that. But it said undercover judicial system. But if you actually see how our system experience it from the other side, because you don't ever put yourself in those other person's shoes, and then you say, this is what I'm sentencing somebody to. And you know what I mean? That's something we're trying to lobby for, maybe a couple of days or a week or something like that as a program. But anyway, here's
the thing. I've been to the prison. I've toured the prison. I've had to interview witnesses at the prison. I've been through those gates. I've seen the cells. I've seen all of that.
There's a experience.
But you're putting judges in harm's way. But
yeah,
I'm not saying
by the same token, it's one of those scenarios where it's like, I love what I do, but not that much.
Unless they weren't a judge prior and they went in there for the experience before they become a judge.
Unless you're going to like put them in one that's not functioning. But, there's severe understaffing with security at the prison.
Yeah, I would say a protected, not a general population.
What are they going to do with Donald Trump then?
No, that's federal prison, which is
Martha Stewart experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Martha Stewart, and she interviewed afterwards and talked about it.
She's an OG now, by the way. That's why she and Snoop Dogg hang out.
Yeah, she I think it was 5 months she did. She talked about the food and how she actually came up with recipes to help them with the things they could get in commissary to make the recipes better.
Jill, prison spreads.
But Judge Demonte, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I tried to get you here earlier.
You
last
did.
year.
I think if I remember, because I came up to you afterwards and apologized. I was so sick. You called. Because you called me at work, you called my cell phone, you called, and it was a week that I had like
almost knocked on her door.
I had like 102-degree fever, and it was and early voting had already started, and I was like, I can't deal with this right now, and then it just sort of fell off the radar because then I won the election, and then when I saw you later, I was like, I owe you an apology. I was like, I'm not ducking you. So
Judge, is there anything that you want to bring up that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Well,
I completely support you.
Thank you.
And
I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program.
Of course.
You don't have anything else for Church?
No, thank you for answering all those questions. And there's so many other things that I'm sure you do and didn't get to cover, but domestic violence, arraignments, all that.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, most people have no clue what their judicial judges or justice court judges.
Yeah, and I promise I do know the Constitution. I just missed that.
This was more like introducing you to the public that don't know you. And so they could get to know you.
It's pretty rare because I'm a very private person. I don't even have social media. Like I have a Twitter account that I don't even log into. Media. I don't even log into it. Somebody told me I should do it for the campaign, and so I've got an account, but I don't even do anything.
Most people have no clue who their judges are or what their mindset is. So it's good to actually.
But the thing is, most people don't even have a clue what their representatives are doing or what their assemblymen are doing, and that's why I kind of go back and forth on this appointed versus because it it could cut both ways.
Yeah, it's.
You wind up with great ones, or sometimes you wind up with only 2 people put in for it, which has happened a couple of times.
And there's corruption on both sides of that coin, anyways.
There is.
There is. Politics play a great deal.
There's wheeling and dealing, and hey, I'm going to give you this position if you promise not to run for this. And,
well, I believe that money should be taken out of that, especially judges' races, because you have the attorneys that are contributing.
As somebody that couldn't raise any money,
How much did you raise?
Well, like during the campaign or after I won, because after you win,
and you won. All these attorneys here. Here's some money.
That's my bad.
Oh, did I forget you?
Yeah, but is that corruption or not? I mean, I believe. I mean, a judge will remember those attorneys and people that contributed to their campaign.
Not really. No, not really. I mean, it's one of those things because they're doing it.
It depends on the judge.
It depends on the judge.
I gave you $5,000, Judge. I make sure my
I mean, for me, it's like you don't own me. It's gonna be the same old me ruling on this. I'm gonna hear both sides. I'm gonna do what's right, regardless of whether you gave me $0 or $500 or $5,000.
Well, there's internal biases though, and I really believe that money should be taken out of that election.
In a perfect world, money would be taken out of it, or basically, it's hey, you're capped at 10,000. I mean, but yeah, no, we went out of pocket.
And before you do your final speaking to the camera deal, California, they have a law that if a law firm or an attorney that gave $1,500 or more, the judge has to put that on the record disclose it, and then it's up to the parties to decide if they want to move forward with this judge or not.
Here's the thing: is anybody can find that because you have to disclose that anyway. And so, I mean, to be perfectly honest, our calendars are so full. If I had to, and I don't even remember. I mean, and I sort of remember because it was so recently. Mm-hmm. Like I just ran, but I can't tell you a year from now, how much money somebody gave me or if they gave me any. But also, it's like to have to put that on the record every single time. Well, just for the record, so and so contributed this amount. What do you guys want to do? And we only have so many justice courts, and usually what the attorneys do,
they give to all.
They give to all of them. So you're left with no judge that can sit.
Unless get somebody from up north.
And you're going to be calling in senior judges from, Elko to come sit. And that costs money. And I think, and I'm pretty good at disclosing when because I have to tell you, it's like, there's been, I think probably 10 times I've opened a file, recognized the name and said, parties, I prosecuted this individual. We're moving this to a different.
Gotcha.
Or the recusal list or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and
do you have a large recusal list?
Well, the problem is I don't know unless I list every single person I prosecuted, which I couldn't. But what happens is I kind of recognize them because
20 years,
it's been 20 years that I've either been defending or prosecuting somebody, and so like you're not going to remember every single name, and but by the same token, there are ones you remember. And what was funny is I did the oath at the Hope for Prisoners graduation in April. Mm-hmm. And there were people on that list that I prosecuted. Yeah. And I was so proud of them. So proud of them.
Yeah. Hope for Prisoners.
That they turn their life around.
That they turn their life around. Because, I mean, what makes Hope for Prisoners work and is that you do pay your debt to society first. Yeah. It's not a get out of jail free card. And diversionary programs are great, but the problem is you wind up with a lot of people that aren't serious about the program that just don't want to go to jail, that eat up all these resources, that you really have to be cautious of that. Diversionary programs are great if you know how to properly screen them.
Well, Judge Mark is going to zoom in on you. And
oh, no, please don't.
And you could say whatever you want, stay out of jail, don't come to my courtroom if you have any questions, email me or whatever you want to say.
Are you ready for me? All right. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. Be safe. The heat just got obnoxious. Be sane with those fireworks, and, be cognizant of those dog owners out there that are, huddled up in their houses trying to keep their fur babies from losing their minds. And I hope I don't see you in my courtroom, but I want to see you at the grocery store. I want to see you at the movies. I want to see you at a 4th of July barbecue. I do not want to see you in my courtroom. So be kind to each other. Happy 4th.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge. Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, thank
Folks,
you.
that's Noreen Demonte, who is the Las Vegas Justice of the Peace for Department 10. And before we go, I just want to let you know this program was sponsored by Ron Quince and Stephanie Phillips, and hope to see you guys next time. This is Steve Sampson, Mike McDonald, Veterans in Politics.
Thank you.